Ellie Dawson pressed her dead sister's letter against her chest and stepped off the train into a town that didn't want her. She had no money, no family, no name they'd recognize. Just a promise she made to a dying woman and a lie she'd carry until it broke her. Somewhere past the dust and the staring men, a black stallion screamed in a corral, the same horse that had shattered 32 cowboys. She didn't know it yet, but that horse would be the only one in this town who'd understand her. If this story grips your heart, subscribe to our channel and follow Ellie's journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. The train pulled into Dry Creek, Wyoming territory on the hottest day of June, 1883. Ellie Dawson stood in the narrow doorway of the passenger car, gripping the iron rail with one hand and a dead woman's letter with the other. Her knuckles were white. Her dress was wrinkled from 3 days of sitting upright because she couldn't afford a sleeper. She stepped down onto the platform, and the heat hit her like an open furnace. A boy ran past, hauling luggage. 2 men leaned against the depot wall, smoking, watching her like she was a stray dog deciding where to sit. She didn't look at them. She looked past them, past the town, toward the hills where dust curled up from dry earth like smoke from a dying fire. "I'm here, Mary," she thought. "God forgive me. I'm here." The man waiting at the end of the platform didn't look like someone who'd written a letter asking for a wife. Samuel Hartley stood 6'2", with his arms crossed and his jaw set like he was bracing for a fight. No flowers, no smile, no hat tipped in greeting, just hard brown eyes scanning the passengers like he was picking cattle at auction. Ellie walked straight to him. "Mr. Hartley?" He looked her over. Quick, clinical. His eyes paused on the scar she hadn't covered well enough on her left wrist, then moved back to her face. "You're smaller than I expected," he said. "You're ruder than I hoped," she replied. Something flickered behind his eyes, not quite a smile, more like surprise that she'd fired back. "You Clara's sister?" The lie caught in her throat for half a second. She'd practiced it 100 times on the train, but standing here, looking at this man who'd written words so raw and honest they'd made her cry in a dead woman's room, the lie felt heavier than she'd planned. "I'm Eleanor Dawson," she said. "Ellie. Mary couldn't make the journey. She sent me in her place." Half-truth. The safest kind. Hartley didn't move. She couldn't come, or she wouldn't. "Does it matter?" He stared at her for a long beat. Then he reached down and picked up her bag, the only one she had. "Wagons this way." They didn't speak for the first 2 miles. The road cut through flat, sun-baked land that stretched out in every direction like God had rolled out a tablecloth and forgot to set the table. Ellie sat rigid on the wagon bench, hands folded, eyes forward. Hartley drove with one hand on the reins, the other resting on his thigh. His silence wasn't awkward. It was practiced. This was a man who'd made peace with not talking a long time ago. Ellie broke first. "Your letter said you needed help around the ranch." "I do." "Cooking? Cleaning?" "That, and staying out of my way." She turned to look at him. "You paid for a train ticket and posted an ad in 3 newspapers so someone could stay out of your way?" His jaw tightened. "I paid for someone who wouldn't ask questions." "Then you picked the wrong woman." He glanced at her sideways. For the first time, something that wasn't irritation crossed his face. Something closer to curiosity. "How old are you?" he asked. 26. "You been married before?" Ellie's hand tightened on her wrist, pressing the scar against her lap. "Once." "What happened?" "He died." "How?" "Badly. Hartley didn't ask again. Hartley Ranch sat at the bottom of a wide valley, flanked by cottonwood trees and bordered by fences that ran farther than Ellie could see. It was the biggest spread she'd ever laid eyes on. Barn, bunkhouse, stable, main house with a wraparound porch, and beyond it all, cattle dotting the hills like dark stones. But it was the sound that stopped her. A scream. Not human. Deep, furious, full of rage and terror, tangled together so tight you couldn't separate them. It came from a corral at the far edge of the property, set apart from everything else like quarantine. Ellie stood up on the wagon. "What is that?" Hartley pulled the reins. "That's Hellfire." "Horse?" "Used to be. Now he's just a problem I can't solve." A boy came running from the barn, thin, maybe 14, with dirt on his face and fear in his eyes.
"Mr. Hartley, he kicked out the water trough again. Near took Billy's arm off."
"Tommy, this is Miss Dawson. Show her the house. I'll deal with the horse." Tommy Wheeler looked at Ellie with wide eyes, then back at Hartley. "She the bride?" Hartley was already walking away. "She's help." Tommy grabbed her bag. "Ma'am, you'll want to stay clear of that corral. Ain't nobody goes near Hellfire anymore." "Why not?" "'Cause 32 men tried to break him. Last one's still walking with a cane." Ellie stared at the corral. She could see him now, a black stallion, massive, muscles coiled under a coat that gleamed like wet coal. He was pacing the fence line, head high, nostrils flared, every inch of him screaming, "Don't you dare." "How long has he been like that?" she asked. Tommy shifted her bag to his other hand. "Long as I been here. Mr. Hartley bought him off a trader 2 years back. Thought he could tame him. Brought in riders from 3 territories. Nobody lasted more than 8 seconds." "What happened to the trader?" "Man named Drake, Cornelius Drake. Folks call him the Breaker." Tommy lowered his voice. "They say he uses wire whips on the ones that don't learn fast enough." Something cold moved through Ellie's chest. She knew that feeling. She'd lived with it for 4 years in a house in St. Louis with a man who used his hands the same way. "Come on, ma'am," Tommy said. "I'll show you inside." Ellie followed him, but she looked back twice. The house was clean but hollow. Functional furniture, no curtains, no pictures on the walls. The kitchen smelled like old coffee and loneliness. Ellie set her things in the small room off the back hallway. A bed, a washstand, a window that faced the corral. She could see Hellfire from here. She watched him pace. Back and forth, back and forth. The same path worn into the dirt like a scar. "You're not angry," she thought. "You're trapped." That night, Hartley ate alone at the head of the table. Ellie sat at the other end. Between them, enough silence to fill a church. "I made stew," she said. He ate without comment. "The boy, Tommy, he's a good kid." Nothing. "Mr. Hartley, if we're going to live under the same roof, you're going to have to use words eventually." He put down his fork. "I didn't bring you here for conversation." "No, you brought me here because you're drowning and you're too proud to say it." His eyes snapped to hers. Dangerous. Dark. The kind of look that would have made her flinch 2 years ago. But Ellie had been looked at by worse men than Samuel Hartley. She held his gaze. "Your letter," she said quietly. "The one you sent to Mary. You wrote, 'I don't need someone to love me. I just need someone to stay.' A man who writes that isn't looking for a housekeeper. He's looking for a witness." Hartley's hand gripped the edge of the table. His knuckles went white. "You read the letter," he said. "Every word." "That wasn't meant for you." "No, it was meant for my sister. But she's dead, Mr. Hartley, and I'm here. So you can either send me back to nothing, or you can let me stay and do what I came to do." "And what's that?" Ellie looked out the window toward the corral. Start with the horse. Hartley let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Almost. Hellfire? You've seen what he does to grown men. I've seen worse. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Her voice didn't rise. It dropped. Low and steady and full of something that made him stop chewing. That horse isn't mean. He's terrified. There's a difference. And every man who walked into that corral with a rope and a whip proved him right. Hartley stared at her. The clock on the wall ticked. Somewhere outside, Hellfire stamped and snorted. 32 men, Hartley said. Riders, trainers. One was a Comanche horseman who'd never failed in his life. He lasted 9 seconds. Did any of them ask the horse what he was afraid of? Hartley blinked. It's a horse. It's a living thing that's been beaten until it believes every hand that reaches for it is going to hurt. You don't fix that with strength. You fix it with time. He pushed back from the table. You want to get killed? That's your business. But I won't be responsible. I'm not asking you to be. He walked to the door, stopped, and said without turning around, You start tomorrow. If that horse so much as scratches you, you're done. Fair enough. He left. The door didn't slam, but it closed with the weight of a man who'd just lost an argument he didn't know he was having. Ellie couldn't sleep. The room was hot, and the walls were thin, and she could hear Hellfire moving in his corral. Hooves on packed earth, that restless pacing, the occasional snort that sounded too much like a sob. She pressed her face against the window glass. I know, she whispered. I know. She pulled Mary's letter from beneath her pillow and unfolded it for the 100th time. Hartley's handwriting was tight, controlled. Every letter pressed hard into the paper, like he was afraid the words would escape if he didn't hold them down. I don't know how to write to a woman. I've never done it. I own the biggest ranch in Dry Creek, Wyoming. I have money. I have land. I have cattle and horses and men who work for me. But I eat alone every night, and I haven't had a conversation that mattered in 6 years. I'm not looking for love. I've given up on that. I'm looking for someone who can stand being in the same house as a man who doesn't know how to be soft. If that's you, come. If it's not, I understand. Most people don't stay. Mary had read this letter out loud to Ellie 2 days before the fever took her. She'd smiled, that weak, fading smile, and said, He sounds like you, Ellie. Broken in the same places. And now Mary was in the ground, and Ellie was in Wyoming, and nothing about this was what it was supposed to be. But she was here. That had to count for something. Morning came like a hammer. Ellie was at the corral before sunrise. No rope, no saddle, no tools. Just herself, standing 10 feet from the fence, arms at her sides. Hellfire saw her immediately. He stopped pacing. His ears went flat. His body coiled like a spring. Tommy appeared behind her, whispering, Ma'am, please don't. Stay back, Tommy. But he won't. How do you know? Because I'm not going in. I'm just standing here. Tommy looked at her like she'd lost her mind, but he stayed. Ellie didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't reach toward the fence or make any sound. She just stood there, breathing slow, eyes soft, watching the stallion the way you'd watch a child having a nightmare, with patience and sadness, and the kind of understanding that only comes from having been there yourself. Hellfire charged the fence. The impact rattled the rail so hard, Tommy yelped and stumbled backward. Ellie didn't flinch. Her heart hammered, but her feet stayed planted. The stallion reared, hooves slashing the air, screaming that terrible scream. Ellie whispered, not to him, to herself. I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. Hellfire slammed the fence again, and again. Then he stood there, chest heaving, eyes wild, staring at her like he couldn't understand why she was still standing. "Good," she said softly. "Now you know." She turned and walked away. Behind her, the stallion went quiet for the first time in weeks. Hartley found her in the kitchen an hour later, making biscuits with shaking hands. "Tommy says you stood in front of the fence while Hellfire tried to come through it." "I did." "That was stupid." "Probably." "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. That position again. His fortress. "What exactly is your plan? Stand there every morning until he gets bored?" "Until he gets curious." "That could take months." "I have nowhere else to be." He watched her knead the dough. Her sleeves had ridden up, and he could see the scar on her wrist. Thin, deliberate, the kind that doesn't come from an accident. "Your husband do that?" he asked. Her hands stopped. "You don't get to ask me that yet," she said. "Yet?" She looked at him. "Trust is earned, Mr. Hartley, for people and for horses. You want my story? Give me a reason to tell it." He stood there a moment longer, then nodded once and walked out. But that afternoon, when Ellie went back to the corral, she found a stool sitting outside the fence. Old, wooden, sturdy. Nobody claimed they'd put it there. She went back every day. Day 2, Hellfire charged 3 times. Ellie sat on the stool and hummed a song her mother used to sing. The stallion paced and snorted, but didn't charge again. Day 3, he stood at the far end of the corral and watched her. Just watched. Ears still flat, muscles still tense, but watching. Day 4, it rained. Ellie sat in the downpour, hair plastered to her face, humming the same song. Tommy brought her a blanket. She refused it. Hellfire stood in the rain too, facing her from 20 feet away. Day 5, Wade Kessler showed up. He was everything Ellie expected from a man who'd failed at something and couldn't forgive it. Broad-shouldered, sun-creased, with hands like shovels and eyes like flint. He'd worked Hartley Ranch for 6 years, tried to break Hellfire 3 times. The third attempt put him in a sling for 2 months. He stood behind Ellie, close enough that she could smell the tobacco on his breath. "You're wasting your time," he said. Ellie didn't turn around. "Good morning to you, too. That horse is broken in the head. Ain't nothing you or anybody's gonna do about it." "Maybe." "I had that animal on the ground with 3 ropes, and he still nearly killed me. You think sitting on a stool singing songs is gonna do what men with ropes couldn't?" Now she turned, looked up at him. "I think men with ropes are the reason he's like this." Wade's face went red. "You calling me the problem?" "I'm saying maybe the approach was wrong." "I've been working horses since before you were born, girl." "And yet here we are." Wade stepped closer. His shadow fell over her. "You don't belong here. You're some mail-order woman playing house with the boss. When he gets bored, you'll be on the next train back to wherever you came from." Ellie stood up from the stool. She was a full foot shorter than Wade, but she didn't tilt her head back. She looked straight at his chest and said, calm as Sunday morning, "Mr. Kessler, I've been threatened by men twice your size and half your age. You'll have to do better than a shadow and a loud voice." Wade's hands balled into fists. "Problem here?" Both of them turned. Hartley stood 20 feet away, hammer in hand, a fence rail over one shoulder. His voice was flat, but his eyes were on Wade, and there was nothing flat about them. "No problem, boss," Wade said. He shot one last look at Ellie, then walked toward the bunkhouse. Hartley watched him go. Then he looked at Ellie. "He give you trouble. You tell me." "I can handle Wade Kessler." "I don't doubt it, but this is my ranch, and nobody threatens anybody on it." He held her gaze for a moment. Something passed between them. Not warmth, not yet, but recognition. The kind that happens when two people who've survived the same kind of darkness see it in each other's eyes. Then he walked away to fix his fence. That night, Ellie sat on the porch steps. The sky was so full of stars, it looked like someone had shattered a mirror across black velvet. The screen door creaked. Hartley came out with 2 tin cups of coffee. He handed her one without a word and sat on the opposite end of the steps. They drank in silence for a while. "My father broke my ribs when I was 12, Hartley said. No preamble, no warning. Like he'd been holding the words in his mouth all day, and they'd finally fallen out. "Threw me into a wall for dropping a cast iron pan. I heard the crack before I felt it." Ellie held her coffee with both hands. "I left at 16, he continued. Walked out in the middle of the night with nothing but boots and a stolen horse. Worked every ranch from Montana to Texas. Saved every dollar. Bought this land when I was 25. He paused. "Built everything you see here with my own hands. And I still hear that crack sometimes, right before I fall asleep." Ellie didn't say, "I'm sorry." She knew how useless those words were. Instead, she pulled back her left sleeve. The scar caught the starlight. A thin white line, precise, damning. "His name was Gerald," she said. "He was a blacksmith in St. Louis. Charming when he was sober. A monster when he wasn't. He did this with a horseshoe nail because dinner was cold." Hartley looked at the scar. His jaw worked, grinding something down. Rage, maybe, or recognition. "What happened to him?" he asked. "His forge exploded. They said it was an accident." She took a slow sip of coffee. "I didn't cry at the funeral. I haven't cried since, and that scares me more than he ever did." The wind moved through the cottonwoods. Somewhere in the dark, hellfire shifted in his corral. A soft sound, not a scream, just movement. "That's why you understand the horse," Hartley said quietly. Ellie nodded. "He's not wild, Sam. He's just been taught that every hand is a fist, every voice is a command, every touch is pain." She looked at him. "You don't break that with force. You break it by being the first person who shows up and doesn't hurt him." Hartley set his coffee down. He looked at the stars, then at the corral, then at her. "Nobody's ever called you Sam," he said. "Do you mind?" He was quiet for a long time. "No," he said. "I don't mind." They sat there until the coffee went cold and the stars turned overhead, and neither of them moved to go inside. Because for the first time in longer than either could remember, they weren't alone. And in the corral, Hellfire stopped pacing. He stood still, facing the porch, ears forward, listening to the sound of 2 broken people learning how to breathe in the same space. The summer stretched ahead of them, long, hot, and full of things none of them were ready for. But tonight, there was quiet. And that was enough. 6 days. That's how long Ellie sat outside that corral before Hellfire took his first step toward her. She almost missed it. She'd been humming, that same hymn her mama used to sing over the washtub back in Missouri, and her eyes had drifted shut against the morning heat. When she opened them, the stallion was standing 15 feet closer than he'd ever been. Not charging, not rearing, just standing there, one ear forward, one ear back, like he couldn't decide if she was a threat or a curiosity. Ellie's breath caught. She didn't move, didn't even blink.
"Hey," she whispered. "There you are."
Hellfire snorted, stamped once, but he didn't retreat. Tommy watched from behind the barn, gripping the doorframe so hard his fingers ached. He wanted to shout. He wanted to tell someone. But he knew better. He'd watched Ellie enough to know that this moment was made of glass, and any noise would shatter it. The stallion held her gaze for 10 full seconds. Then he turned and walked to the far fence. But he didn't pace. For the first time in 2 years, Hellfire stood still and faced a human being without screaming. Ellie's hands were trembling when she stood up. She walked to the barn, on legs that barely held her, and when she got inside, she pressed her back against the wall and let out a breath she'd been holding for a week. Tommy was there. "Ma'am, you okay?"
"He looked at me, Tommy."
Her voice cracked.
"Not through me. Not past me. At me."
Tommy grinned. "That mean it's working?"
"It means he's thinking about it."
She wiped her eyes fast, before anyone else could see.
"Don't tell Mr. Hartley. Not yet."
"Why not?"
"Because hope is fragile, and I don't want to break it by saying it out loud."
Tommy nodded like he understood, even though he didn't. Not fully. He was 14. But he'd been an orphan long enough to know that some things you protect by keeping them quiet. What neither of them saw was Hartley watching from the second-floor window of the ranch house, coffee in hand, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the woman who'd just done in 6 days what 32 men couldn't do in 2 years. He didn't say anything either, but he set out 2 cups for coffee that night. And when Ellie came to the porch, she didn't ask whose the second cup was. She just sat down and picked it up like it had always been there. They drank in silence, but it was a different silence now, warmer, less like a wall and more like a bridge neither of them was ready to cross.
"He moved today," Ellie said.
"I know." She looked at him.
"You were watching."
"I watch everything on this ranch."
"You were watching me."
Hartley took a long sip. "Don't make it something it isn't."
"I'm not making it anything. I'm just saying what's true."
He set the cup down harder than necessary. "You want to know what's true? I've poured more money into that horse than half the men in this territory earn in a year. I've brought in the best riders west of the Mississippi, and a woman who's been here less than 2 weeks just got closer to him than any of them. Does that bother you?" "It confuses me."
"Good," she said. "Confusion is the first step to learning something new."
He stared at her. "You always talk like that?"
"Like what?"
"Like a preacher who's been in a fist fight." Ellie almost smiled. Almost.
"My mama used to say the best sermons come from people who've bled."
Hartley looked away, but the corner of his mouth twitched, and Ellie saw it, and something loosened in her chest that had been tight for years. The next morning she found the stool had been moved closer to the corral fence, 3 feet closer, and beside it a canteen of fresh water with a cloth over the top to keep the dust out. Nobody claimed it. Ellie sat on the stool and started humming. Hellfire came to 15 feet, then 12, then 10. By the end of the second week, he was close enough that Ellie could hear his breathing. Deep, heavy, wary. She could see the scars now. Faint white lines across his left flank, hidden under the dark coat unless the light hit them right. Whip marks. Old ones. Layered over each other like sentences in a story nobody wanted to read. Her stomach turned.
"I see them," she whispered to him. "I see what they did to you."
Hellfire's ear flicked toward her voice. His nostrils flared. But he didn't move away.
"I have them too," she said. "Different kind. Same language."
She didn't reach for him. Not yet. She just let the words hang between them like a hand extended in the dark. That afternoon, Ruth Abernathy showed up. Ellie was in the kitchen when she heard the wagon. She looked out and saw a woman built like a fence post, short, square, unyielding, climbing down with a basket covered in checkered cloth.
"You must be the bride,"
Ruth said when Ellie opened the door. "I must be. I'm Ruth. I run the only place in Dry Creek where the food won't kill you." She pushed past Ellie into the kitchen and set the basket on the table. "Brought cornbread. Figured Hartley's been feeding you whatever that man calls cooking." "He doesn't cook. I cook." "Then you both need this cornbread." Ruth sat down without being invited and looked at Ellie the way a doctor looks at a patient. Searching, direct, no room for lies. "Whole town's talking about you." "I've been here 2 weeks." "Honey, you were the talk of this town before you stepped off that train. A mail-order bride for Sam Hartley? Man hasn't spoken a full sentence to another human being in years. People are curious. Let them be curious. Oh, I intend to. But curious turns to mean real quick in a small town, especially when a woman starts doing things men can't." Ruth leaned forward. "I heard about the horse." Ellie stiffened.
"What did you hear?"
"That you've been sitting outside that corral every morning like you're waiting for church. That the horse hasn't charged in 5 days. That Wade Kessler's been telling every man in the bunkhouse you're a witch." "A witch?" "His word, not mine. But Wade's a man who thinks if his fist can't fix it, it must be the devil's work." Ruth's eyes softened. "I'm not here to warn you off, Ellie. I'm here to tell you to watch your back. Men like Wade don't just talk. They act. And they act ugly." Ellie sat down across from her. "You know him well?" "I know every man in this territory. Fed most of them. Buried a few." Ruth broke off a piece of cornbread and pushed it toward Ellie. "Wade Kessler's been Hartley's right hand for 6 years. He tried to break that horse 3 times. 3rd time put him in a sling. A man like that doesn't forget failure. He wears it like a sore tooth. Can't stop touching it. Can't stop hurting." "I'm not trying to make him look bad."
"You don't have to try. You just have to succeed."
Ruth stood up. "One more thing. Sam Hartley is the best man in this valley, and the worst at showing it. Whatever's happening between you two, don't rush it. He's like that horse. You push too fast, he'll bolt. Nothing's happening between us." Ruth smiled, the kind of smile that said she'd been alive long enough to know when someone was lying to themselves. "Cornbread's best warm. Don't let it sit." She left the same way she came, fast, certain, with the energy of a woman who'd survived everything a frontier town could throw at her, and decided to keep cooking anyway. Ellie ate the cornbread standing at the window, watching Hellfire graze. Ruth was right about Wade. She could feel it in her bones. 3 days later, she was proved right. Ellie arrived at the corral before dawn, same as every morning. But something was wrong. Hellfire was pressed against the far fence, trembling, head high, eyes rolling white. She looked down. Broken glass, scattered across the ground inside the corral, right where the stallion walked his morning path. Shards glinting in the first light like teeth. Ellie's blood went cold. She didn't touch the gate. She walked around the outside of the corral, counting the pieces, mapping where they fell. Someone had thrown them over the fence, deliberately, in a pattern designed to cut hooves. Tommy found her 20 minutes later, on her hands and knees inside the corral, picking up glass with her bare fingers. Blood dripped from her palm where a shard had sliced deep, but she didn't stop. "Ma'am, your hand! Get me a bucket, Tommy, and a broom." "But you're bleeding." "I said get me a bucket." Tommy ran. Hellfire watched from the far side, still trembling, but his eyes were on Ellie now. Not with fear, with something else. Recognition, maybe. the understanding that this woman was bleeding for him. When every piece was cleared, Ellie sat in the dirt and wrapped her hand with a strip torn from her apron. Hellfire took 3 steps toward her, then 4, then 5. He stopped 2 feet away, closer than he'd ever been. Ellie looked up at him through tears she hadn't given permission to fall. "Nobody's going to hurt you," she said. "Not while I'm here." The stallion lowered his head. Not all the way, just enough. And his breath, warm and heavy, moved across her wounded hand. Ellie closed her eyes and let the tears come. Hartley found the blood on the fence rail an hour later. Tommy told him everything, about the glass, about Ellie's hand, about what he'd seen the stallion do. Hartley didn't say a word. He walked to the bunkhouse, opened the door so hard it cracked against the wall, and stood in the doorway like judgment itself. "Who did it?" 8 men looked up from their bunks. Nobody spoke. "I'm going to ask one more time. Who put glass in that corral?" Wade Kessler sat on his bunk in the corner, whittling a piece of wood. He didn't look up. "Probably blew in with the wind. This time of year. Glass doesn't arrange itself in a walking pattern, Wade." Now Wade looked up. "You accusing me of something, boss?" Hartley stepped inside. "I'm telling you that if I find out anyone on this ranch endangered that horse or that woman, I'll put them on the road with nothing but the clothes they're standing in. No pay, no reference, no second chance." The room went silent. Hartley looked at Wade for a long time. Wade looked back. Something passed between them. Not words, but a line being drawn in sand. "We clear?" Hartley said. "Crystal," Wade replied. But his eyes said something different. His eyes said, "This isn't over." Hartley left. He found Ellie at the well, washing her hand. The cut was deep. It would scar. "Let me see," he said. "It's fine." "It's not fine. Let me see." She held out her hand. He took it. Gently. More gently than she expected from hands that big and that rough. He turned it over, looked at the cut, and his jaw tightened so hard she heard his teeth grind. "This needs stitching," he said. "I've had worse." "Stop saying that." His voice broke on the last word. Just barely. Just enough. "Stop acting like getting hurt is something you're used to." Ellie looked at him. Really looked. And she saw it. Behind the anger, behind the clenched jaw and the hard eyes, there was fear. Raw, naked fear. Not of the horse, not of Wade, of the fact that someone had hurt her on his land, under his watch, and he hadn't stopped it. "Sam," she said softly, "it's a cut. I'll live." "That's not the point." "Then what is?" He still held her hand. He hadn't let go. And when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I told you nobody threatens anyone on this ranch. I meant it. And I failed." "You didn't fail." "I should have seen it coming. You can't protect everyone from everything." "I can try." He looked at her hand in his. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a clean handkerchief, white, pressed, the one thing about him that was ever neat, and wrapped it around her palm, careful, slow, like he was handling something precious. Ellie's breath caught, not from the pain, from the tenderness. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be touched without bracing for impact. "Thank you," she whispered. He let go of her hand like it burned him and stepped back. "I'll send Tommy to town for proper bandages." "Sam," he stopped. "The horse came to me today, 2 feet away. He breathed on my hand after I bled for him." She held up her wrapped palm. "Sometimes the broken things can see who's fighting for them." He stood there for a long beat. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked toward the barn. But she saw his hand come up to his face. Quick. A motion he probably thought she wouldn't catch. He was wiping his eyes. That evening, Ellie didn't sit on the porch. She sat on the steps of the corral, with her bandaged hand resting on the lowest rail. Hellfire stood on the other side, so close she could feel his heat through the wood. She hummed. He listened. And when Tommy came to tell her dinner was ready, he found them like that. Woman and horse, separated by nothing but a fence that didn't mean much anymore. "Ma'am," Tommy said quietly, "Mr. Hartley made dinner." Ellie turned. "He cooked?" "Well, he tried. It's something. I think it's supposed to be stew." Ellie laughed, a real laugh, the first one since she'd arrived in Wyoming. It surprised her so much she covered her mouth. Hellfire's ear swiveled toward the sound. And if horses could look curious, he did. At the table, Hartley sat with 2 bowls of something brown and questionable. He looked almost nervous. Samuel Hartley, who'd faced down rustlers, droughts, and a horse that had broken 32 men, looked nervous about stew. Ellie sat down, took 1 bite, and kept her face completely neutral. "Well?" he asked. "It's warm." "That's not a compliment." "It's the best I can do, honestly." He looked at her. She looked at him. And then they both laughed. Not big, not loud, but real. The kind of laughter that breaks through years of silence and pain, like the first crack in a frozen river. Tommy, standing in the hallway where they couldn't see him, grinned ear to ear. After dinner, Hartley walked Ellie to the porch. They stood at the railing, close but not touching. "I wrote that letter 18 months ago," he said. "Must have started it 40 times. Threw away every draft. Finally just wrote what was true, and sent it before I could talk myself out of it." "Why Mary? Why her ad?" "She said she wasn't afraid of hard work or hard men. That she'd rather be useful than comfortable." He paused. "Sounded like someone who wouldn't expect me to be something I'm not." Ellie gripped the railing. The lie sat between them like a stone in her shoe. She wasn't Mary. She wasn't the woman he'd chosen. She was the ghost standing in her sister's shoes. And every day, the deception grew heavier. "Tell him," a voice said inside her. "Tell him now, before it gets worse." But she looked at his face, open for once, unguarded, trusting. And she couldn't. Not yet. Not when everything was still so new and fragile. "She would have liked you," Ellie said instead. "You think so?" "I know so. She was the kind of person who could see past the rough parts." Hartley looked at her. "So are you." The words hung in the warm night air. Ellie felt them settle against her skin like the first rain after a long drought. "Good night, Sam," she said. "Good night, Ellie." She went inside. He stayed on the porch until the stars came out. And in the corral, Hellfire stood facing the house, still and quiet, ears forward, like he was listening to the sound of something changing, something none of them could name yet. But Wade Kessler, lying awake in the bunkhouse, staring at the ceiling with his jaw clenched and his fists balled against the mattress, could feel it too. And he hated it. He hated that the woman hadn't broken. Hated that the horse was softening. Hated that Hartley, the man who'd always valued strength, always respected the hard way, always chosen muscle over mercy, was changing because of her. Wade reached under his bunk and pulled out the gloves he'd worn when he'd thrown the glass. He turned them over in his hands. The glass hadn't worked. He'd need something bigger. And 300 miles east, in a hotel room in Cheyenne, A man named Cornelius Drake sat at a card table reading a telegram from Dry Creek. The message was 4 words long. The horse is taming. Drake folded the telegram, slipped it into his vest pocket, and smiled the way a wolf smiles when it picks up a scent. He signaled the barman for another whiskey. He had time. Broken things always find their way back to him. Cornelius Drake arrived in Dry Creek on a Tuesday, riding a chestnut mare with silver-studded tack and wearing a suit that cost more than most men in town earned in a year. He didn't come alone. 2 riders flanked him, big, quiet men with hands that rested too comfortably near their holsters. He tied up outside Ruth's place and walked in like he owned it. Ruth was behind the counter, drying a glass. She didn't look up. "We don't serve trouble here." "Good thing I'm not trouble, ma'am. I'm a businessman." Drake removed his hat, placed it on the counter, and smiled. Perfect teeth, cold eyes. "I'm looking for Sam Hartley's ranch. Heard he's got a horse I sold him 2 years back." "You're Drake." "My reputation precedes me." "Your reputation stinks." Ruth set the glass down hard. "That horse came to this valley half dead with whip scars older than my best skillet. Whatever you did to him, it ain't the kind of business we welcome." Drake's smile didn't waver. "I trained that horse with methods every rancher west of St. Louis uses. If the animal's got a temperament problem, that's not my failing. That's breeding. Get out of my establishment." "I'll have coffee first." "You'll have the road first." Drake studied her for a moment, then picked up his hat and tipped it. "I can see hospitality is a dying art. No matter. I'll find Hartley on my own." He walked out. Ruth gripped the counter until her knuckles went white, then sent Tommy, who'd been eating biscuits in the back, running to the ranch with a message. Tommy arrived at Hartley Ranch 20 minutes later, breathless, face red, legs shaking from sprinting the full 2 miles. "Mr. Hartley! Mr. Hartley!" Hartley was in the barn with Ellie, watching her prepare a soft halter she'd been stitching by hand for 3 days. He turned at the boy's voice. "Drake!" Tommy gasped. "Cornelius Drake. He's in town. He's coming here." Ellie's hands stopped moving. She didn't know the name, but she knew the reaction. Hartley's entire body changed, shoulders squared, jaw locked, eyes going flat and hard like someone had shuttered windows behind them. "When?" Hartley asked. "Now, maybe an hour. Ruth sent me." Hartley looked at Ellie. "Stay inside." "Who is Cornelius Drake?" "The man who broke Hellfire before I bought him." Ellie's stomach dropped. "The traitor? The one Tommy told me about? The one who uses wire whips?" "He's not a traitor. He's a breaker. He buys wild horses, beats them into submission, and sells them as trained. If they don't break, he works them harder. If they still don't break, he puts them down." Hartley's voice was controlled, but beneath it, rage coiled like a rattlesnake. "I paid him $300 for Hellfire because I thought I was saving the horse. Drake thought I was buying damaged goods." "What does he want now?" "I don't know, and that's what worries me." He turned to Tommy. "Get Wade. Tell the men nobody talks to Drake without my say-so." Tommy ran. Hartley looked at Ellie one more time. "I mean it. Stay inside." "Sam, please." It was the please that stopped her. Samuel Hartley didn't say please. He gave orders. He made statements. He set rules. Please was a word from a language he barely spoke, and the fact that he'd used it now told Ellie everything she needed to know about how dangerous this was. "Okay," she said, "but if he comes near that horse, I won't stay inside. Not for you. Not for anyone." Hartley nodded like he'd expected nothing less. Then he walked out to meet the devil. Drake arrived an hour later, right on schedule. He rode up the main path slow, theatrical, his 2 men fanning out behind him like wings on a vulture. He dismounted at the porch and looked around the ranch, the way a man looks at a property he's already bought in his mind. Hartley stood on the porch steps, arms crossed, feet planted. "Hartley," Drake tipped his hat. "Fine spread you've got here. Better than last time I visited." "You weren't invited last time either. What do you want, Drake?" "Straight to business. I always liked that about you." Drake hooked his thumbs in his vest pockets. "I heard a rumor. Seems that black stallion I sold you, the one nobody could ride, is being handled by a woman. A mail-order bribe, no less." "Who told you that?" Drake smiled. "Small territories have loud voices. Is it true?" "That's my business." "It is. But here's what makes it my business, too." Drake stepped closer. "I sold you that horse as unbreakable. If a woman, no offense intended, has tamed him, then I undersold. That means the horse is worth considerably more than what you paid, and I'd like to renegotiate." Hartley didn't move. "You sold me a horse you'd beaten half to death. I paid you $300. The deal's done." "Deals can be undone." "Not this one." Drake's smile thinned. He looked past Hartley toward the corral where Hellfire stood watching, ears flat, body rigid. The stallion had sensed something. His nostrils flared, and a low, rumbling sound came from deep in his chest. Not a scream, but a warning. "He remembers me," Drake said, almost proud. Hartley's hands dropped to his sides. "You need to leave." "I'm making you a fair offer, Hartley. $500 for the horse. Cash. Right now." "He's not for sale." "Everything's for sale. It's just a question of price." Drake glanced toward the house. "Or leverage." Hartley stepped down from the porch. He was taller than Drake by 3 inches, broader by a foot. "You threatening me?" "I'm negotiating." "It sounds like threatening." "Then let me rephrase." Drake's eyes hardened. "I trained that horse for the governor of Montana, a commission worth $2,000. When the horse broke, when I couldn't deliver, I lost the contract, lost face, lost business. I sold that animal to you as scrap. Now I hear he's performing like a champion. That means he was never unbreakable. It means my methods weren't the problem." "Your methods were exactly the problem." Drake's jaw tightened. "Careful, Hartley. You whipped that horse with wire until his flank looked like a butcher's floor. You starved him. You hobbled him. You broke every ounce of trust in him and then called him defective when he wouldn't submit. That's not training. That's torture." Drake stepped back. His smile was gone now, replaced by something colder. "I came here to do business. If you won't sell the horse, maybe you'll consider a public demonstration. The territorial fair is in 2 weeks. I'll sponsor an event. Your woman rides the stallion in the arena. 5 minutes. If she holds, I'll pay you $1,000 and walk away. If she doesn't, I take the horse back, free of charge, and I'll train him properly this time. Over my dead body. That can be arranged, too." Drake held up both hands. "A joke. Just a joke. Think about it, Hartley. $1,000. That's a new barn, a new fence line, a whole season of feed." He put his hat back on. "I'll be at the hotel in town. You've got 3 days to decide." He mounted his horse, tipped his hat once more, and rode out with his men trailing behind him. Hartley stood in the yard until the dust settled. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the effort of not putting his fist through Cornelius Drake's perfect teeth. He heard the screen door open behind him. I told you to stay inside, he said without turning. I heard everything. Ellie's voice was steady, but underneath it, something burned. He wants to take Hellfire back. He's not taking anything. Sam, he'll find a way. Men like him always find a way. If it's not the deal, it'll be the law. If it's not the law, it'll be force. Hartley turned. Ellie stood on the porch, her bandaged hand against her chest, and her gray-blue eyes were blazing with a fury he hadn't seen before. Not fear, not sadness, rage. I'll do it, she said. No. I'll ride Hellfire at the fair. Absolutely not. Sam, listen to me. I said no. His voice cracked like a rifle shot. I am not putting you in an arena with that horse in front of a crowd so Drake can turn it into a circus. That's not happening. It's not your choice. The hell it isn't. It's my ranch, my horse. Ellie came down the steps. She stood in front of him, close enough that he could see the pulse hammering in her throat. That horse is not your property. He's a living thing that was tortured and thrown away. And the man who tortured him just rode onto your land and smiled about it. If you don't let me ride, Drake will find another way to take him. And next time, there won't be $1,000 offer. There'll be a bill of sale and a sheriff. He's got no legal claim. Since when has the law protected anything that matters? Her voice dropped. My husband hit me for 4 years, Sam. 4 years. And every time I went to the sheriff, he told me Gerald was a good man with a hard job. The law didn't save me. I saved myself. And I will not stand here and wait for someone else to decide what happens to that horse. Hartley stared at her. The air between them crackled with everything they couldn't say, and everything they were terrified to feel. If he throws you, he won't. You don't know that. I know him. She put her unbandaged hand on Hartley's chest. He flinched like she'd burned him, but he didn't step back. I know him the way I know myself, the way I know you. We're all the same, Sam. Hellfire, you, me. We're all just scared animals trying to figure out who's safe. His hand came up, covered hers against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, fast, hard, hammering against her palm. If anything happens to you in that arena, he said, voice raw, I will burn this territory to the ground. Nothing's going to happen to me. Promise me. I can't promise that, but I can promise I won't quit. Not on the horse, not on this ranch. She paused. Not on you. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. 3 days, he said. We've got 3 days to get him ready. I only need 2. The next morning, Ellie entered the corral for the first time. No fence between them. No barrier. Just her and Hellfire and 30 feet of packed dirt. The stallion's head shot up. Every muscle in his body locked. His eyes went wide, white-rimmed, and his breath came fast and sharp. Ellie didn't walk toward him. She sat down in the dirt, cross-legged, hands open in her lap, and started humming. Tommy watched from outside the fence, gripping the rail. Hartley stood beside him, rigid, barely breathing. If he charges, Hartley started. She knows what she's doing, Tommy said. She's sitting on the ground in front of a horse that's put 6 men in the hospital. And he's standing still, Mr. Hartley. Look. Hellfire hadn't moved. His ears rotated, one forward, one back. His breath slowed. The tension in his body didn't disappear, but it shifted, from fear to uncertainty, from uncertainty to curiosity. Ellie hummed, the same melody, always the same. Her mama's song, the one about the river and the willow tree and the woman who waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. Hellfire took a step, then another. Slow, deliberate, testing each footfall like the ground might open beneath him. 20 feet. 15. 10. Hartley gripped the fence rail so hard the wood creaked. 8 feet. 5. The stallion stood directly in front of Ellie, his massive head lowered until his nose was level with her face. She could feel his breath on her skin, warm, sweet with grass, trembling. She stopped humming.
"Hey, boy," she whispered. "I'm right here."
Hellfire touched her cheek with his muzzle. Soft, tentative, like pressing a finger against a soap bubble, terrified it would pop. Ellie's tears fell silently. She didn't raise her hand. She just let him touch her. Let him decide. Let him choose. The stallion exhaled, a deep, shuddering breath that seemed to release 2 years of terror. And then he did something no one on that ranch had ever seen him do. He lay down, right there in the dirt, beside a woman he'd known for 3 weeks. He folded his legs beneath him and lay down, turning his head until it rested against her knee. Tommy's mouth fell open. Hartley's vision blurred. He blinked hard and turned away so nobody would see. Ellie placed her hand on Hellfire's neck. Gently. So gently. She could feel the scars beneath his coat, ridges and valleys of old pain mapped across his body like roads on a terrible journey.
"Nobody's ever going to hurt you again," she said. "Not while I breathe."
The horse closed his eyes. When Ellie finally stood and walked out of the corral, her legs were numb and her face was streaked with tears and dirt. Hartley was waiting at the gate. He didn't say anything. He just opened his arms. She walked into them. He held her, awkward, stiff at first, like a man who'd forgotten how. Then his arms tightened, and he pulled her against his chest, and his chin rested on the top of her head, and he held on like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting beneath his feet. "You're remarkable," he said into her hair.
"I'm tired," she whispered.
"I know."
"I'm scared of what happens at the fair."
"I know that too." She pulled back just enough to look up at him.
Sam, there's something I need to tell you. About Mary. About why I'm really here.
His face didn't change. "Whatever it is, it can wait."
It can't.
"Ellie." He cupped her face with both hands, rough palms against wet cheeks. "I don't care why you came. I care that you stayed." She wanted to tell him. The truth sat in her throat like a stone. But his hands were warm, and his eyes were kind, and for one moment, just one, she let herself believe that the lie wouldn't matter. It would. That afternoon, Wade Kessler rode into town alone. He tied his horse behind the hotel and walked in through the back entrance. He found Drake in the dining room, eating steak and reading a newspaper like a man on vacation. "You Wade?" Drake asked without looking up. "I am." "Sit down." Wade sat. His hands were on the table, palms flat, like he was steadying himself. "You worked that horse," Drake said. "3 times, I'm told. He nearly killed me, and now a woman's got him lying down in the dirt like a dog." Drake folded the newspaper. "That must sting." Wade's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "Same thing you want. That woman gone, and that horse back where he belongs." Drake leaned forward. "You know that stallion's worth $2,000 properly trained. The governor's offer still stands. All I need is the horse. Hartley won't sell." "No, but he might lose." Drake's smile returned, thin, precise. "The fair is in 2 days. If the woman rides and fails, the horse is mine by agreement. All she has to do is fall." Wade understood. His stomach turned, but he understood. And what's in it for me? Hartley's going to need a new foreman when this is over. A man he trusts. A man who was right about the woman all along. Drake pushed an envelope across the table. And $200 for your trouble. Wade looked at the envelope. He thought about 6 years of loyalty.
He thought about the collarbone that still ached when it rained. He thought about Ellie sitting in that corral while a horse that had nearly killed him lay at her feet like a lamb. He took the envelope. "What do you need me to do?" Drake told him. And 2 miles away, on a porch that was starting to feel like home, Ellie pressed her forehead against Hartley's shoulder and listened to his heartbeat, and tried not to think about the truth she was carrying and the storm she could feel building at the edges of everything she'd just begun to love. Hellfire stood at the corral fence, facing the road that led to town. His ears were flat. His body was rigid. He could smell something on the wind. Something old. Something that tasted like wire and blood and the worst nights of his life. And for the first time in weeks, he was afraid again. The morning of the fair broke hot and mean. Ellie was up before the sun, standing at the corral gate with her hand on the latch, watching Hellfire move through the half-dark. He was restless. She could feel it in the way he carried his head, too high, too tight, nostrils working overtime, like he was trying to read the air for danger. "I know," she said softly. "I feel it too." She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Drake's smile, that thin, polished, predator's grin, and behind it, the scars on Hellfire's flank, and behind those, the scars on her own wrist, and behind those, Gerald's face, the night he'd pressed a horseshoe nail into her skin and told her it was her fault. Different men, same hunger. The need to break something beautiful, just to prove they could. She heard boots on hard ground and turned. Hartley was walking from the house, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one without a word. His face was drawn, his eyes shadowed. He hadn't slept either. "You don't have to do this," he said. "We've been over this. I'm going over it again." "Sam." She took the coffee. Their fingers touched. Neither pulled away. "If I don't ride today, Drake takes this to a judge. He's already got papers drawn up. Tommy heard his men talking outside the hotel. He's claiming the original sale was fraudulent. Says you knew the horse was trainable and underpaid." "That's a lie." "Since when did lies need to be true to win in court?" Hartley's hand tightened around his cup. "I'll hire a lawyer." "With what? You put every dollar into this ranch. A legal fight with Drake would bleed you dry in 6 months." She looked at him steady. "1 ride, 5 minutes, and he walks away forever. Or you get thrown, and he takes the horse." "I won't get thrown." "You can't know that." "I know Hellfire." "You've known him 3 weeks." "I've known him my whole life." Her voice caught, just barely. "Every time Gerald raised his hand, I was Hellfire. Every time I flinched at a door slamming or a voice getting too loud, I was that horse in that corral. I don't need years with him, Sam. I need understanding. And I've got more of that than any man who ever swung a rope at him." Hartley stared at her. The fight went out of his body like air from a punctured tire. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The first time he'd touched her like that, deliberately, tenderly, without the excuse of a bandage or a handshake. "If you fall," he said, "I'm coming in after you." "If I fall, you stay back and let me get up." "Ellie, promise me, if I fall, you let me get up on my own. That's how it has to be." He closed his eyes, opened them. "I promise." She smiled, faint, tired, but real. "Now go feed the chickens.
I need to talk to my horse." Hartley left, but he stopped halfway to the barn and looked back at her, standing at the gate, small against the wide Wyoming sky, one hand reaching through the rails toward a black stallion who pressed his nose against her palm like she was the only safe thing in his world. And Hartley understood, with a certainty that hit him like a fist to the chest, that he was in love with her. Not the comfortable, quiet kind he'd imagined when he wrote that letter 18 months ago. The terrifying kind. The kind that rearranges your bones and makes you realize that everything you built, the ranch, the fences, the walls around your heart, was just a way of waiting for someone brave enough to walk through. He turned away before she could see his face. By noon, the fairground was packed. People had come from 30 miles in every direction. Wagons, horses, families on foot. The territorial fair was always an event. But word had spread about the demonstration, the mail-order bride riding the stallion that broke 32 men, and that word had turned an event into a spectacle. Ruth found Ellie behind the main tent, braiding her hair with fingers that shook. "You eat anything today?" Ruth asked. "Couldn't." "You're going to ride a 1,700-pound animal in front of 300 people on an empty stomach?" "Seems that way." Ruth pulled a biscuit from her apron and shoved it into Ellie's hand. "Eat. You faint up there, Drake wins, and I'll never forgive you." Ellie bit into the biscuit. It was perfect. Warm, buttery, the kind of food that tastes like someone cares about you. "Ruth, can I ask you something?" "Quick, they're setting up the arena." If you found out someone you trusted had lied to you, not a cruel lie, not a selfish lie, but a lie that started out of grief and turned into something they couldn't take back, would you forgive them? Ruth looked at her, long, searching. "This about Hartley?" Ellie didn't answer. "Honey, every person on this earth carries a lie they're afraid to put down. The question isn't whether he'll forgive you. It's whether you trust him enough to let him decide." Ruth squeezed her arm. "Now eat that biscuit and go show these men what a woman can do." Ellie finished the biscuit, wiped her hands, straightened her spine. Then she walked to the arena. The crowd parted for her, not in respect, in curiosity. She heard the whispers. "That's her. Smaller than I thought. No way she lasts 2 minutes. Hartley's lost his mind." She didn't look at any of them. She looked straight ahead to where Hellfire stood in the holding pen, Tommy at his side, the boy pale-faced and terrified, but refusing to leave. "He's wound tight, ma'am," Tommy said. "The noise, the people. He don't like it." "I know." Ellie put her hand on the stallion's neck. He was trembling. Fine, constant vibrations running through his body like current through a wire. His eyes darted from face to face in the crowd, seeing threats everywhere. "Easy," she murmured. "Easy, boy. It's still just you and me. Nothing's changed." But something had changed. She could feel it. A wrongness in the air, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the pressure drops and every living thing goes quiet. She looked across the arena. Drake stood at the judge's platform, arms folded, that vulture's smile back in place. Beside him, his 2 men. And behind them, half hidden by the crowd, Wade Kessler. Ellie's blood went cold. Wade wasn't supposed to be here. Hartley had told him to stay at the ranch, watch the property, keep his distance. But there he was, leaning against a post, arms crossed, watching her with eyes that held nothing good. She found Hartley in the crowd. He was pushing toward her, face tight, reading her expression. "What is it?" he asked. "Wade's here." Hartley's head snapped around. He scanned the crowd and found Kessler. Something dark crossed his face. "I told him to stay." "He's with Drake's men," Hartley went still, the kind of still that comes before violence. "I'll handle it."
No, Ellie grabbed his arm. Not now. If you pull Wade out, it'll cause a scene. Drake will use it. He'll say you're stalling, trying to back out.
"I don't care what Drake says."
But the crowd does, and the judge does, and the terms of the deal do. She held his arm tight. Let me ride. Whatever Wade's planning, I'll handle it from the saddle.
"You don't know what he's planning. I know he can't do anything inside that arena without 300 witnesses seeing it. Whatever he's got planned, it'll be small. A noise, a distraction, something to spook Hellfire at the wrong moment." She looked him dead in the eye. "I've lived through worse distractions than Wade Kessler." Hartley's fists clenched. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to pull her out, to throw Drake's deal in the dirt and take whatever came next. But Ellie's hand was on his arm, and her eyes were steady, and she was asking him to trust her. Trust. The one thing neither of them had ever been able to give. 5 minutes, he said. His voice was rough. 5 minutes, and I'm counting every second. "I know you are." She let go of his arm and walked toward the arena gate. The announcer, a thin man with a voice like a rusted hinge, climbed onto the platform. "Ladies and gentlemen, today's featured event, a demonstration of horsemanship between Miss Eleanor Dawson and the stallion known as Hellfire. 5 minutes in the arena. No ropes, no reins, just rider and horse. Sponsored by Mr. Cornelius Drake of the Drake Horse Company." The crowd buzzed. Drake tipped his hat to scattered applause. Ellie didn't hear any of it. She was inside herself now, in the quiet place she'd built during the worst years of her life. The place she went when Gerald was drunk, and the walls were thin, and survival meant becoming very, very still. She walked into the arena. The dirt was hard-packed, the fence rails high. 300 faces stared down at her. She was smaller than every one of them expected. Tommy led Hellfire in from the holding pen. The stallion balked at the gate, eyes rolling, body coiled. The crowd noise hit him like a wall. "Shh," Ellie said. She put both hands on his face, one on each side, and pressed her forehead against his. "Listen to me, not them. Me." Hellfire's breathing slowed. His trembling didn't stop, but it eased. His focus narrowed from the screaming crowd to the woman in front of him. "It's 5 minutes," she whispered. 5 minutes and we go home. You and me. Together." She stepped back, took a breath, and mounted. No saddle, no reins, just her legs against his sides, and her hands in his mane, and her weight settled into him like she belonged there. The clock started. Hellfire didn't move for 3 full seconds. Then the crowd roared, and he erupted. He reared, massive, terrifying. Front hooves slashing the air higher than Ellie's head. She locked her legs and leaned forward, pressing her body against his neck, moving with him instead of against him. He came down hard, spun left, bucked once, twice, 3 times, each one powerful enough to shatter a rib if she landed wrong. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed. Ellie held on, not with strength, with rhythm. Every buck she absorbed, every spin she followed. Her body read his the way a musician reads a song. Not fighting the notes, but riding them. 1 minute. Hellfire charged the fence. Ellie shifted her weight and he turned, barely, hooves skidding in the dirt. The crowd on that side stumbled backward. 2 minutes. He slowed. His bucks lost their fury. His breathing changed from rage to effort. Ellie started humming. Low, under her breath. The melody from the corral. Her mama's song. Hellfire's ears swiveled back. 3 minutes. The crowd was silent now. 300 people holding their breath. Ellie felt the moment the fight left him. Not surrender,
release. Like a wave that crashes and then pulls back to sea. The tension drained from his body beneath her. His head lowered, his stride smoothed. She sat up straight, hands loose in his mane, legs relaxed. They moved together in a slow circle, horse and rider, two broken things, whole together. 4 minutes. That's when she heard it. A sharp crack, like a whip.
Coming from behind the fence, from the gap between the holding pen and the judge's stand. Hellfire's entire body seized. His head shot up. His eyes went white. Ellie knew that sound. Wire on wood. The same sound that had carved those scars into his flank. Another crack, louder. Hellfire screamed. That terrible, ancient scream. The one from the worst nights. The one that meant pain was coming. He bucked with everything he had. Ellie went airborne for half a second. She came down hard on his back, felt something wrench in her shoulder, and grabbed Maine with both fists. The crowd erupted in panic. People shouting, children crying. Ellie looked toward the sound and saw Wade Kessler crouched behind the fence, a leather strap in his hand, snapping it against the rail. Crack, crack, crack. Hellfire was gone. Lost in memory, lost in pain, bucking and spinning and screaming like the arena had become every terrible place he'd ever been. Ellie felt herself slipping. Her shoulder burned. Her grip was failing. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. She had 30 seconds left. 30 seconds between winning and losing everything. She stopped fighting, stopped gripping. She bent forward until her mouth was against Hellfire's ear, and she sang. Not hummed. Sang. Full voice, cracking, desperate, pouring every ounce of who she was into the words of a song about a river and a willow tree and a woman who waited. Hellfire's ear rotated toward her voice. She sang louder. The crowd fell away. Wade fell away. Drake fell away. There was nothing in the world but her voice and his ear, and the space between fear and trust. The stallion's bucks shortened, weakened. His breathing hitched, then stopped. He stood still, trembling violently but standing still. His head dropped low, and a sound came from him. Not a scream, not a snort, but a deep, shuddering exhale that sounded almost human. 5 minutes. The bell rang. The clock stopped. Ellie sat on Hellfire's back, both arms around his neck, face buried in his mane, crying so hard her body shook. The stallion didn't move. He stood perfectly still while the woman on his back broke apart and put herself back together. The crowd was silent for 5 full seconds. Then it erupted. Not in cheers, in something deeper. Something that sounded like 300 people who'd just witnessed a thing they'd carry for the rest of their lives. Ellie slid off Hellfire's back. Her legs buckled, and she went to one knee in the dirt. Tommy was already running toward her. Hartley was climbing the fence, but it was what happened next that stopped every voice in the crowd. Hellfire turned around, lowered his head, and pressed his muzzle against Ellie's hair. Gentle, careful, the way you'd touch something you were afraid of losing. Ellie reached up and held his face and whispered, "We did it. We did it." Hartley reached her. He dropped to his knees in the dirt beside her and pulled her against him and held on like the world was ending. "I heard the whip," he said, voice shaking with rage. "I heard it, Ellie. I'll kill him." "Not now," she gripped his shirt. "Not now. Please." Tommy stood beside Hellfire, holding the stallion's halter, tears running down his face without shame. The boy looked at Hartley.
It was Wade, sir. I saw him, behind the fence, with a strap.
Hartley's eyes went black. He stood up and turned toward the crowd. Drake was already moving. Not toward Hartley, toward the exit. His smile was gone. His men were pulling horses from the hitch. "Drake!" Hartley's voice cut through the noise like an axe. 300 heads turned. Drake stopped, turned slowly. His composure was cracking, but he held it. Barely. "She made the 5 minutes, Hartley. Fair's fair. I'll have the check sent." "You had a man whip-crack behind the fence to spook that horse." The crowd went dead silent.
I don't know what you're talking about.
"Wade Kessler, your man, with a leather strap, snapping it against the rail to sound like a wire whip. The same sound you used to torture this horse for 2 years. Drake's face went pale. "That's an accusation without—" "I saw him!" Tommy's voice rang out, high and clear and furious. The boy stepped forward, chin raised, body shaking but standing tall. "I saw Mr. Kessler behind the fence. He was cracking a strap every time the horse turned that direction. He was trying to make Hellfire throw her." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, looking for Wade. But Kessler was already gone, slipping through the back of the crowd like smoke. Ruth Abernathy pushed her way to the front. She pointed at Drake. "This man came to my establishment 3 days ago asking about the horse. And I'll tell you something else. I saw his men buying drinks for Wade Kessler at the saloon 2 nights running." "You think that's coincidence?" The crowd's murmur turned to a growl. Drake straightened his vest. "This is hearsay. A boy, a cook, and a woman with a grudge. I came here for legitimate business. You came here to steal a horse you already tortured." Ellie was on her feet now. Hartley's hand was on her shoulder, but she stepped forward on her own. She was covered in dirt, her shoulder was screaming, and her voice shook, but her eyes burned with a fire that made Drake take a half-step back. "I felt those scars," she said. "Every one of them. Under his coat where you thought nobody would look. You whipped that animal until his spirit broke, and then you sold him like garbage. And when you heard someone had put him back together, you couldn't stand it, because it meant you were wrong. Your way, the fists, the whips, the fear, it doesn't work. It never worked. And a woman who weighs 120 pounds just proved it, in front of everyone you're trying to impress." Drake's composure shattered. His lip curled, and for 1 second, the real man showed through. Ugly, vicious, cornered. "That horse is damaged goods," he spat. "Always was. And so are you, sweetheart. 2 broken things pretending to be—" Hartley moved so fast, the crowd gasped. He had Drake by the collar, lifted half off his feet, face to face. "Finish that sentence," Hartley whispered. "Please, give me a reason." Drake's men reached for their belts, but the crowd closed ranks. Farmers, ranchers, shopkeepers, ordinary people forming a wall between Drake's muscle and Hartley's rage. "Let him go, Sam." The voice came from the back. An older man in a marshal's badge pushed through the crowd. Tom Whedon, territorial marshal, 60 years old with a white mustache and eyes that had seen everything. "Let him go, and let me do my job." Hartley held on for 3 more heartbeats. Then he released Drake, who stumbled back, straightening his collar.
"Marshal," Drake started, "I'd like to file—"
"You'd like to leave," Whedon said. "I've got a boy who witnessed sabotage, a woman who's been assaulted by proxy, and a whole crowd of citizens who saw you try to rig a public event. You can leave Dry Creek tonight on your own horse, or you can leave tomorrow in my custody. Your choice." Drake looked at Hartley, at Ellie, at the crowd that stared back at him with a hard, unified contempt of people who know exactly what they're looking at. He picked up his hat from the dirt, put it on, and walked to his horse without another word. His men followed. Nobody moved until the sound of hooves faded down the road toward Cheyenne. Hartley turned to Ellie. She was swaying on her feet, one hand pressed against her shoulder, face white with pain she'd been hiding since the 4th minute. "Hospital," he said.
"There's no hospital in Dry Creek."
"Ruth's place. She can bind that shoulder."
"Sam, wait."
Ellie gripped his hand.
"There's something I have to tell you, right now, before another day passes." "Ellie, your shoulder." "Sam, please." He stopped. The crowd was dispersing around them, but he didn't see any of them. Just her. Dirt on her face, tears in her eyes, holding his hand like a lifeline. "I'm not the woman you wrote to," she said. "The letter. It was addressed to my sister, Mary Dawson. She's who you chose. She's who answered your ad." Hartley's face didn't move. "You told me Mary couldn't make the journey."
"Mary's dead."
Ellie's voice cracked.
"She died of typhoid fever in Missouri. I held her while she went. She never even read your letter. I read it to her. She smiled and said—"
Ellie pressed her hand to her mouth.
She said, "He sounds like you, Ellie. Go find him."
Hartley dropped her hand, not in anger, in shock. He stepped back, 1 step, then 2, and she could see it happening, the shutters closing behind his eyes, the walls going up brick by brick. "You lied to me," he said.
"Yes."
"From the first day. From the first minute. Everything, the name, the letter, the reason you came."
"I came because I had nothing, no one. My sister was dead, my husband was dead, and your letter was the only thing in the world that sounded like someone who might understand."
Her tears fell freely. She didn't wipe them.
"I didn't come to deceive you. I came to survive. And then I met you, and I met that horse, and surviving turned into something I wasn't expecting."
"What?"
"Belonging."
Hartley stood there. The sun beat down on both of them. Tommy held Hellfire 20 feet away, the boy's face stricken, watching 2 people he loved standing on the edge of something breaking. "You should have told me," Hartley said. His voice was quiet, controlled. The voice of a man pressing all his pain into a very small box. "Before the horse. Before the corral. Before I—" He stopped. His jaw worked. "Before I started needing you."
"I know."
"I'm sorry, Sam. I am so sorry." He turned and walked away. Ellie stood in the empty arena, dirt under her boots, pain in her shoulder, and a hole in her chest where hope had been. Hellfire pressed his nose against her back. She reached behind her and touched his face.
"I know, boy," she whispered. "I know."
She walked to Ruth's place alone. Ruth took one look at her, sat her down, and bound her shoulder without asking a single question. When she was done, she put a cup of whiskey in Ellie's good hand and sat across from her. "He'll come back," Ruth said.
"You don't know that."
"I know Sam Hartley. I've known him since he was a skinny, scared kid working ranches for pennies. That man doesn't feel things halfway. If he's angry, it's because you matter. And things that matter don't get thrown away. They get fought for." Ellie drank the whiskey. It burned going down, and she was glad. She needed to feel something besides the ache. Back at the ranch, Hartley sat on the porch with no coffee, no company, just the dark and the sound of Hellfire moving in the corral. The Stallion was agitated, pacing again. Not the wild, terrified pacing of before, but something restless, searching, like he was looking for someone who wasn't there. Hartley knew the feeling. He pulled out the letter he'd written 18 months ago, the copy he'd kept, folded and refolded until the creases were soft as cloth. He read it again. I don't need someone to love me. I just need someone to stay. Someone to stay. That's what he'd asked for. Not a name, not a history, not a pedigree or a background check. Just someone who could stand being in the same house as him and not leave. Ellie hadn't left. Not when the horse charged. Not when Wade threatened her. Not when Glass cut her hands. Not when Drake tried to break her. Not when 1,700 pounds of terrified animal tried to throw her into the dirt in front of 300 people. She'd stayed. She'd stayed through everything. And the one thing she'd lied about, her name, her identity, the letter. She'd lied because her sister was dead and she was alone, and his words had felt like a hand reaching through the dark. How many times had he reached through the dark himself? He folded the letter and put it back in his pocket. Then he stood up and walked to the barn, saddled his horse, rode into town under a sky full of stars. He found her at Ruth's place, asleep in a chair with her shoulder bound and her face streaked with dried tears. Ruth stood behind the counter, watching him. "She's exhausted," Ruth said. "Don't you dare wake her up to yell." "I'm not going to yell." He knelt beside the chair. Ellie's hand lay open on the armrest, palm up, the scar on her wrist catching the lamplight. He placed his hand over hers, gently, the way she'd first reached through the fence toward hellfire. Not grabbing, not demanding, just offering. Her eyes opened. She saw him, and her breath hitched, and she started to speak, but he shook his head. "You asked me once what I'd do if you weren't the bride I wrote to," he said. "I didn't answer. I should have." He took a breath. "I don't care about the name on the letter. I care about the woman who stepped off that train with nothing but scars and courage and sat in front of a horse that terrified 32 men and didn't move. I care about the woman who bled to keep Glass out of his path. I care about the woman who rode him in front of this whole territory while someone tried to break her and sang instead of screaming." His voice cracked. He let it. "I care about you, Ellie, whatever your name is, whoever you were before you got here. I don't need the story. I need the person." Ellie's tears fell onto his hand. "Stay," he said. "Not for the horse, not for the ranch, for me." She leaned forward, pressed her forehead against his, and whispered, "I already chose that, Sam. I chose it the first night you made coffee for two." He pulled her close, careful of the shoulder, careful of everything. And he held her, in a quiet restaurant, in a small town, at the edge of nowhere, while Ruth Abernathy turned away and wiped her eyes on her apron and pretended she wasn't watching. Outside, the Wyoming stars burned, and somewhere on the road to Cheyenne, Cornelius Drake rode hard into the dark, beaten by a woman and a horse, and a truth he'd never understand. That some things can't be broken with whips, and some people can't be broken at all. Ellie rode back to the ranch at dawn, with her shoulder bound tight and her heart beating in a rhythm she didn't recognize. Not fear, not grief, something new. Something that felt like the first breath after nearly drowning. Hartley rode beside her. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The silence between them had changed again. No longer a wall, no longer a bridge, but a room they could both live in. When they reached the gate, Hellfire was standing at the corral fence, facing the road, waiting. The stallion nickered when he saw Ellie, a low, soft sound that Tommy, who was sitting on the porch with a blanket around his shoulders because he hadn't slept either, said he'd never heard the horse make before. Ellie dismounted and went straight to him. She pressed her good hand against his neck and closed her eyes and stood there for a long time, just breathing with him. "We're home," she whispered. Hellfire pressed his head against her chest. And something that had been clenched inside Ellie for years, maybe decades, finally, fully, let go. Hartley watched from 10 feet away. Tommy watched from the porch. Neither interrupted. Some moments belong only to the people in them. When Ellie turned around, her eyes were red, but her face was calm.
She looked at Hartley and said, "We need to talk about what happens next."
"Breakfast first," Tommy called from the porch. "I made eggs. They ain't great, but they ain't poison neither." Ellie almost laughed. "When did you learn to cook, Tommy?" "Last night. Ruth came by and showed me. Said somebody in this house ought to know how to feed people proper." They ate at the kitchen table, the three of them, for the first time. Hartley at the head, Ellie beside him, Tommy across. The eggs were overcooked and the coffee was weak, and it was the best meal any of them had ever had, because it felt like family. Not the kind you're born into, the kind you build from wreckage. Halfway through, Hartley set down his fork. "Drake's gone, but he'll try something from Cheyenne. Legal papers, a claim on the horse, maybe worse." "Let him try," Ellie said. "I'm serious. A man like that doesn't lose in public and let it go. His pride won't allow it." "Then we prepare."
"How?"
Ellie looked at him. "We register Hellfire, properly, with the Territorial Brand Office. Your name, your ranch, documented and sealed. Drake's original bill of sale was for an untrainable horse, sold as is. He's got no reclaim clause. If he takes it to a judge, we show the documentation and the bill of sale, and 300 witnesses who watched him try to sabotage a public event." Hartley stared at her. "How do you know about territorial brand registration?" "My husband was a blacksmith. I spent 4 years handling his paperwork because he was too drunk to hold a pen. I know contracts, bills of sale, and property law better than most lawyers in St. Louis." Tommy grinned. "She's smarter than all of us, Mr. Hartley." "I'm aware, Tommy." Ellie's mouth twitched. "I'll ride into town today. The registrar's office should have the forms. You're not riding anywhere with that shoulder." "Then drive me." Hartley pushed back from the table. "Fine, but we're stopping at Ruth's first. She'll want to know you're alive." "She already knows. That woman knows everything before it happens. Ain't that the truth?" Tommy muttered. They drove into town that morning. Ellie sat close to Hartley on the wagon bench. Not touching, but close enough that their shoulders nearly met on every bump. It was the kind of nearness that said more than words. The kind that happens when two people have decided to stop running from each other. The town was different. Ellie felt it the moment they pulled onto the main street. People stopped what they were doing. Men tipped hats. Women nodded. A girl, no older than 10, ran up to the wagon and held up a handful of wildflowers. "These are for you, miss. My mama said you were the bravest thing she ever saw." Ellie took the flowers. Her throat tightened. "Tell your mama thank you." The girl ran off. Ellie looked at the flowers in her hand and then at Hartley, who was staring straight ahead with his jaw working overtime to keep his face neutral. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Don't pretend that didn't get to you." He cleared his throat. "I got dust in my eye." "Both eyes?" "It's a dusty town." She let him have it. Some men need time to learn that tenderness isn't weakness. Sam Hartley was learning faster than most. At Ruth's place, the old woman took one look at Ellie and pulled her into a hug so tight Ellie gasped. "Easy, shoulder." "Oh, hush. A little pain never killed nobody." Ruth pulled back and studied her face. "You told him?" "I told him." "And?" Ellie glanced at Hartley, who was standing by the door looking uncomfortable, the way men do when women are having a conversation that matters. "He stayed," Ellie said. Ruth's eyes went bright. She turned to Hartley. "Samuel Hartley, you get over here." "Ma'am, I don't think—"
I didn't ask what you think.
Get over here. Hartley walked over like a man approaching a grizzly bear. Ruth grabbed his face with both hands, stood on her toes, and kissed his forehead.
Your mama would be proud,
she said. Hartley blinked. His mouth opened. Nothing came out.
Now sit down, both of you. I've got something to say.
Ruth went behind the counter and came back with an envelope. Old, yellowed, sealed with wax.
This came for you 3 days ago, she told Hartley. Posted from Cheyenne before Drake ever showed up here. I held it because the timing was wrong, but you need to see it now.
Hartley opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, handwritten. He read it once, then again. The color drained from his face.
What is it?
Ellie asked. He handed her the letter. She read it aloud, her voice going quieter with every line. It was from the governor of Montana Territory. It confirmed that Cornelius Drake had been under investigation for animal cruelty, fraud, and the sale of stolen horses across 3 territories. The governor's office was requesting any information about Drake's activities in Wyoming, and specifically about a black stallion sold under questionable circumstances 2 years prior. Ellie looked up. He's wanted. Not yet, Hartley said, but he will be. This letter asks for sworn statements, witnesses, documentation. You have all of that. We have all of that. He looked at her. You're the best witness there is. You documented those scars. You rode that horse in public. You can testify to what Drake's methods did. Ellie's hands trembled. Ruth slapped the counter. Now that's what I like to hear. You two write. I'll feed you. Tommy can deliver it to the territorial marshal before sundown. They spent the next 4 hours at Ruth's back table. Ellie wrote in a clear, precise hand, describing Hellfire's condition when she first saw him, the location and pattern of his scars, his behavioral responses to whip-like sounds, the systematic evidence of prolonged abuse. Hartley added his own account, the purchase, Drake's claims, the 32 failed attempts to handle the horse, and the events at the fair. When they finished, the document was 12 pages long. Ellie signed it. Hartley signed it. Ruth signed as a witness. Tommy signed too, adding his own account of Wade Kessler and the glass in the corral. Tommy rode the envelope to Marshal Whedon's office at a full gallop. He was back in an hour with a message. The marshal had read every page and was forwarding it to the governor's office by telegraph that afternoon. He said to tell you something else, Tommy told Hartley, catching his breath. He said Wade Kessler was spotted heading south toward Colorado, left his gear at the bunkhouse, didn't take nothing but his horse and Drake's money. Hartley nodded slowly. There should have been satisfaction in it, but all he felt was tired. Wade had been with him 6 years. 6 years of work, of trust, of shared labor under the same sun. And the man had sold him out for $200 and a grudge. Ellie put her hand on his arm.
You couldn't have known.
I should have. The signs were there. The way he talked about the horse. The way he looked at you.
People hide what they are, Sam. Sometimes for years. That's not your failure. That's their choice.
He covered her hand with his. They sat like that in Ruth's back room, while the sun moved across the floor and the town went about its business, and something between them settled into place, like a key turning in a lock. That evening, Hartley did something he'd never done. He asked for help. He gathered the remaining ranch hands in the bunkhouse, 7 men, minus Wade, and he stood before them without his armor. No crossed arms, no set jaw, just a man talking to the people who worked his land. I owe you an apology, he said. I've run this ranch like a fortress, kept you at arm's length, treated you like tools instead of men. That's going to change. The men shifted, glanced at each other. This wasn't the Sam Hartley they knew.
Miss Dawson has shown me something I should have learned a long time ago, he continued. Strength isn't about control. It's about trust. And I haven't trusted any of you the way you deserve. A weathered cowhand named Virgil spoke up.
Boss, we don't need a speech. We need to know what's happening with the ranch.
Fair enough. Drake's gone. Wade's gone. We're short-handed going into summer. I need every one of you, and I'm asking, not telling, asking you to stay.
We ain't going nowhere, Virgil said. But the woman, Miss Dawson.
She's staying too? Hartley looked at Ellie, who stood in the doorway behind the men. She hadn't been invited, but she'd come anyway. Of course she had. That's her decision, Hartley said. I'm staying, Ellie said from the doorway. Every head turned. And I'm going to need volunteers. Hellfire isn't the only horse on this ranch that's been handled wrong. I've watched how your horses flinch at ropes, how they balk at gates. There's a better way, and I'd like to teach it to anyone willing to learn. Silence. Then Virgil tipped his hat. Ma'am, you rode a horse that put me in bed for a week. I reckon I can sit through a lesson. One by one, the others nodded. Not because they believed yet, but because they'd seen what Ellie did at the fair, and seeing changes a man faster than any argument. That night, Hartley walked Ellie to the corral. Hellfire stood in the moonlight, calm, his dark coat silver-edged. He came to the fence when he heard their footsteps and pushed his nose against Ellie's hand. I want to show you something, Hartley said. He pulled a folded paper from his shirt pocket. I went to the registrar's office this afternoon while you were writing with Ruth. Ellie unfolded the paper. It was a deed, a land deed, for 5 acres of the north pasture, bordering the creek, registered in the name of Eleanor Dawson. Her hands shook. Sam, I can't. It's done. It's yours. Not because of the horse, not because of us. Because you came here with nothing, and you deserve to own something that can't be taken away. This is too much. It's 5 acres out of 800. It's not enough. He took a breath. I want you to build something on it, whatever you want. A house, a barn, a place for horses nobody else wants. Ellie stared at the deed. The paper blurred through her tears. She thought of Mary, of her sister's face in that bed in Missouri, thin and gray and smiling at the end, saying, "Go find him." She thought of Gerald, and his fists, and his forge, and the horseshoe nail, and the years she'd spent believing she was worth less than the things he broke. She thought of the train to Wyoming, and the woman in the white dress, who stepped off with nothing but a dead woman's letter and a lie she was terrified to carry. That woman felt like a stranger now. Someone she'd been before she learned that broken wasn't the same as finished. A sanctuary, she said. What? I want to build a sanctuary for horses that have been abused, broken, thrown away. A place where they can come and be handled right, where nobody uses whips or wire or force. She looked at Hellfire, where they learned that not every hand is a fist. Hartley was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We'll need more fencing. And a bigger water trough, and someone who knows what they're doing." Ellie smiled through her tears. "I know a woman." He pulled her close. She fit against him like she'd been designed for the space, her head against his chest, his arms around her shoulders, the deed crumpled between them. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. He tipped her chin up. "You said something to me once. You said, 'You don't have to deserve me. You just have to stay.' Same goes for this. Same goes for everything." She kissed him. Not dramatic, not desperate. Not the kind of kiss that happens in storybooks with swelling music and perfect light. A real kiss. Quiet. Certain. The kind that tastes like coffee and dust and the decision to stop being afraid. 2 weeks later, they stood under the sycamore tree by the creek,
The same tree where Ellie had cried the night she thought she'd lost everything, and married each other. No church, no preacher, just Marshall Whedon, who'd gotten himself ordained by mail 3 years ago for exactly this kind of occasion. Ruth stood as witness, crying into a handkerchief she denied owning. Tommy held Hellfire's lead rope, the boy beaming so hard his face looked like it might split. Ellie wore a white cotton dress, not the one she'd arrived in, but a new one Ruth had sewn from fabric she'd been saving for something worth sewing. Hartley wore a clean shirt. For him, that was the equivalent of a cathedral. When Whedon asked if anyone objected, Hellfire stamped once and everyone laughed. The nervous, joyful, relieved laughter of people who'd earned their happiness the hard way. Hartley slipped a ring on Ellie's finger, silver, hand-forged by the blacksmith in town, with a tiny horse head etched into the band. "I had him put something on the inside," Hartley said. Ellie tilted the ring to catch the light. Engraved in letters so small she had to squint. "You stayed." She couldn't speak. She just held his hand and pressed the ring against her heart and nodded. Hartley kissed her forehead. "That's all I ever needed." The summer deepened around them. Ellie started work on the sanctuary the next week. Hartley and Virgil and the Hands built fence lines and shelters. Tommy painted a sign for the gate, hand-lettered, crooked, perfect. Hellfire Sanctuary. We don't break things here. We listen. The first horse arrived in August, a bay mare from a ranch in Montana, starved thin and head-shy from being beaten. The rancher's wife brought her in a trailer, crying, saying she couldn't watch it anymore. Ellie met them at the gate. She didn't make promises. She didn't offer guarantees. She just said, "We'll take care of her, and if you need a place too, Ruth's got a spare room and the best cornbread in Wyoming." The woman stayed 3 days. When she left, she was standing straighter. By September, there were 4 horses in the sanctuary. By October, 7. Word spread the way it does in small territories, quietly, through women's networks and church groups, and the kind of whispered conversations that happen over wash lines and kitchen tables. Not everyone who came brought horses. Some brought children. A widow from Casper arrived with 2 boys who hadn't spoken since their father died. Ellie sat with them in the corral and let them watch Hellfire graze. The younger boy reached through the fence and touched the stallion's nose. Hellfire held perfectly still. The boy spoke his first word in 4 months. "Soft," he said. His mother collapsed against the fence and sobbed. Ellie held her. Tommy brought water. Hartley stood back and watched, learning something about strength that he couldn't have learned in 30 years of building fences and breaking ground. One evening in late October, Ellie found a letter in the mailbox. No return address. Cheyenne postmark. She opened it at the kitchen table while Hartley washed dishes, a skill he'd recently acquired and performed with the grim determination of a man defusing a bomb. The letter was from Drake's lawyer. Cornelius Drake had been arrested in Cheyenne on 12 counts of animal cruelty, 4 counts of fraud, and 1 count of trafficking stolen livestock. The sworn statements from Dry Creek had been entered as primary evidence. The trial was set for December. The lawyer wasn't writing to gloat. He was writing to ask if Ellie would testify. She set the letter down. Her hands were steady. "Sam." He turned from the sink, soap on his forearms. "What?" "They want me to testify against Drake. In Cheyenne, in front of a territorial judge." Hartley dried his hands, sat down across from her, read the letter. His face went through 3 emotions in 10 seconds. Anger, pride, and something softer that he still didn't have a name for. "You want to do this?" he asked.
I have to do this.
You don't have to do anything. Yes, I do. She pressed her palm flat on the table. Every scar on that horse's body is a sentence Drake never served. Every night Hellfire spent pacing that corral in terror is a crime nobody answered for. I sat in that dirt and felt those marks under his coat, and I promised him. I promised that someone would speak for him.
Then we go to Cheyenne.
You don't have to come.
Ellie. He reached across the table and took her hand. I'm not letting you walk into a courtroom alone. Not now. Not ever. She gripped his fingers. Ruth can watch the sanctuary. Ruth can run the whole territory if she puts her mind to it.
And Tommy can handle the horses.
Tommy's been handling those horses better than half my crew. Kid's got your touch. Ellie smiled. Then she looked at the letter again, and the smile faded.
Drake will have lawyers. Good ones. They'll come after my credibility. They'll find out about Mary. About the lie.
They'll say I'm a fraud. You're not a fraud. I pretended to be someone I'm not to get here. You pretended to be your dead sister to escape a life that was killing you. Any judge with his bench will see the difference. Hartley squeezed her hand.
And if they don't, they'll have to get through me first.
She didn't argue. She'd learned that about Sam Hartley. When he planted his feet, the earth moved around him, not the other way. They went to Cheyenne in December. Ellie testified for 3 hours. She described the scars. She described Hellfire's behavior. She described the whip crack at the fair, and the glass in the corral, and the look in a horse's eyes when it hears the sound of the thing that broke it. Drake's lawyer tried to discredit her. He brought up the false identity. He called her a liar, a deceiver, a woman who'd stolen her dead sister's future. Ellie looked at him and said, I am a liar. I lied about my name to escape a life where I was beaten daily. I lied to survive. And I'd do it again. But I am not lying about what that man did to that horse. The scars don't lie. The fear doesn't lie. And the 32 men who tried and failed to touch a horse that let me hold him, they don't lie either. The courtroom was silent. Drake was convicted on all counts, sentenced to 8 years in the territorial prison. His horse operation was seized. Every animal in his possession was released to rescue organizations across 3 territories. When the verdict came down, Ellie didn't cheer. She sat in the gallery with her hand on Hartley's knee and her eyes closed, and she thought about a black stallion standing in a corral in Wyoming. Free, calm, loved. We did it, she thought. All of us. They came home to Dry Creek on a cold afternoon in late December. Tommy met them at the gate with Hellfire saddled and ready, a red ribbon tied to his halter because the boy had a flair for drama nobody had taught him. "Welcome home, ma'am," Tommy said.
Welcome home, boss.
Hartley ruffled the boy's hair. "You keep the place standing?" "Better than standing. Ruth made me fix the south fence, reorganize the feed barn, and whitewash the porch. I think she's trying to adopt me." "Would that be the worst thing?" Ellie asked. Tommy went quiet. His face changed, the bravado dropping away to reveal the orphan underneath, the boy who'd never been chosen by anyone. "No, ma'am," he said softly. "That wouldn't be the worst thing at all." Ellie looked at Hartley. He looked at her. A conversation passed between them in 3 seconds, without a single word. "Tommy," Hartley said, "how'd you feel about staying on permanent? Not as a stable boy. As family." Tommy's eyes went wide. His lip trembled. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then he threw his arms around Hartley's waist and held on with the desperate strength of a child who'd been waiting his whole life to hear those words. Hartley stood rigid for a moment. The old instinct, the wall, the flinch. Then his arms came down around the boy and he held him the way he wished someone had held him when he was 14 and scared and alone. Ellie pressed her hand over her mouth and let the tears come. Spring arrived the way it always does in Wyoming. Sudden, stubborn, and full of life that had no business surviving the winter, but did anyway. Ellie's sanctuary had grown to 12 horses. People came from across the territory to learn her methods. No whips, no wire, no force. Just patience and presence, and the revolutionary idea that a broken thing doesn't need to be dominated. It needs to be heard. Hartley built Ellie a proper stable, open-sided, no locks, no stalls. Horses could walk in and walk out, just like she'd wanted. On the morning they finished, he nailed a plaque above the entrance. Hand-carved, simple. For Mary, who sent the right woman. Ellie touched the letters with her fingertips. She thought of her sister, of the letter, of the long, terrifying train ride to a town that didn't want her.
"She'd love this,"
Ellie whispered.
"She'd love you," Hartley said. "Everybody does."
Not everybody.
Everybody who matters.
Years passed. The ranch grew. The sanctuary grew faster. Tommy grew tallest of all, shooting up like a cottonwood sapling, turning from a scared boy into a steady young man who could gentle a wild horse with a voice and a hand and a patience he'd learned from watching Ellie every single day. Ruth kept cooking, kept meddling, kept showing up unannounced with cornbread and opinions. She never married again, never slowed down, and never once let Sam Hartley forget that she'd told him so. And Hellfire, the stallion who'd screamed in a corral for 2 years, who'd broken 32 men, who'd carried the scars of a cruel man's ambition on his body like a map of everything that was wrong with the world. Hellfire grew old in a pasture with no fences. He grazed beside mares and foals. He let children climb on his back. He stood in the sun, with his eyes half closed and his ears soft and his breath easy. And if you watched him long enough, you could almost believe he'd forgotten every terrible thing that had ever happened to him. But Ellie knew better. You don't forget. You carry it. You just learn to carry it differently. On a warm evening in June, the same month she'd arrived, the same heat, the same dust, Ellie sat on the porch with Hartley beside her and Tommy whittling on the steps, and Hellfire standing at the pasture fence, facing the house, ears forward, peaceful.
"Sam, I need to tell you something."
He looked at her. Good something or bad something? She took his hand and pressed it against her stomach. Flat still, but not for long. Hartley went still. His eyes dropped to her hand over his, then back to her face. "You mean—"
"I mean—"
His face broke open. Not a crack, not a fracture. A blooming, like every wall he'd ever built, fell at once. And behind them was a man who'd been waiting his whole life to feel something this big and this good and this terrifying. "We're going to need a bigger house," he said. "We're going to need a bigger everything." He pulled her close and pressed his forehead against hers and laughed. A real, full, shaking laugh that startled Tommy off the steps and made Hellfire nicker from the pasture. "What's happening?" Tommy called. "You're going to be a brother," Ellie said. Tommy dropped his whittling knife. His mouth fell open. Then he whooped so loud the chickens scattered and Hellfire tossed his head, and the whole ranch seemed to vibrate with the sound of a boy's joy. Hartley held Ellie's face in his hands. Rough palms, gentle touch. The hands of a man who'd learned that the strongest thing you can build isn't a fence or a barn or a ranch. It's a place where broken things walk in and whole things walk out. "Thank you," he said.
"For what?"
"For stepping off that train." Ellie smiled. "Thank Mary. She's the one who sent me. I thank her every day." The sun went down over Dry Creek, Wyoming. The pasture turned gold. Hellfire stood beneath the sycamore tree, old now, slower. His dark coat shot through with silver. A child would come soon, a girl with her mother's gray-blue eyes and her father's stubborn jaw, who would grow up running barefoot through grass, humming a song her mama taught her, with her hand on a black stallion's neck and no fear in her heart. But that was still to come. Tonight there was just this, a man and a woman on a porch, holding hands, watching the light fade, knowing that the hardest part was behind them, and the best part was just beginning. Because some things once broken don't stay broken. They get rebuilt, stronger, kinder, truer, by the people brave enough to stay. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, please subscribe to our channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss another powerful tale. Every click helps us bring you more stories about love, healing, and second chances. Drop a comment below and tell us, what moment hit you the hardest? We read every single one. Thank you for staying until the end. We're so glad you're here.